There are tons of different ways that you can make yogurt right at home. In fact, you don't even need any kind of special equipment. It will make itself on the counter. However, using the Ninja Foodi or your Instant Pot makes it super easy to make a delicious homemade yogurt, and that's exactly what we're gonna do today. Welcome to the Salted Pepper, where we cook for real life using real food and we keep it real simple. And today we're gonna make something super easy. It is homemade yogurt. Now I say it's super easy because I really feel like it is, but I know that you guys have struggled with getting the consistency correct, with just having little things go wrong. And one of the reasons why I think there's been so many inconsistencies in the results that you guys are getting is because of all the different ways that you can program it in the Ninja Foodi. And what I mean by that is that each model seems to work a little bit differently. So as you can see, I have the OL series. This is the one lid model of the Ninja Foodi. This is the newest one. That is the one that I'm going to use for today's demonstration. So I will show you exactly how to set the yogurt function on this machine. This is for a traditional boiled yogurt. So that means you're going to get a half of a gallon or a gallon of milk and a yogurt starter, which I'll get into that in just a minute. And you're going to boil the milk before you add the starter, okay? So that is to remove any bacteria that might be in the milk, okay? Now, you can skip this process by hitting your button again and skipping the boil. And when it says ferment, you can just pour in your ultra pasteurized milk and you can put in your yogurt culture and start fermenting right away. So you can bypass the boiling of the milk if you're using something like Fairlife, which is an ultra pasteurized milk, okay? But if you're using just the traditional kind of milk from the grocery store like I am today, we need to boil it first. Now, there are pros and cons, in my opinion, to using the yogurt function for the boil part of the process. The pro is it's pretty much set it and forget it, right? You just hit a button. It is going to boil the milk to the correct temperature and cool it down. Once that milk has cooled down to the correct temperature where it's safe to add your culture, then it's going to alert you to add your culture, and then you just hit the start button again and it ferments. So it's super hands-off and super easy. But it takes a long time. I am talking hours and hours and hours, probably about 4 hours. And I'll time it for you this time, so I'll let you know exactly how long it took. But it takes about 4 hours, I'm guessing, for it to boil and then cool down because it needs to bring it up to 182 degrees to kill the bacteria and then bring it back down to about 105 or so that it's safe to add in the culture and we don't kill the good bacteria that we want to have, multiplied to make our yogurt. So there is a workaround, and I want to go over that real quick in case you want to be more in control of that timing. You can use your sear saute function. So you can pour the milk into the inner pot, use the sear saute, stay here with it because you're going to want to stir it, bring the temperature up to 182 degrees, turn the Ninja Foodi off, then you can set your inner pot. So let's say we just did that. Pull out your inner pot with some pot holders so your hands don't get burnt and stick it into a sink of ice water. You can stick it into a bigger bowl of ice water, just like that. That'll cool down the pot, which will cool down the yogurt a lot faster. But for this recipe, I'm gonna take it just through the entire process, okay? All right, so this is the OL 701, but even if you have the OL 601 or the 501, this procedure is going to be exactly the same, okay? So the first thing I'm gonna do is add in my milk. This is a full gallon of milk. You can do less if you aren't sure if you're gonna like the homemade yogurt. You can do just a half of a gallon, but I usually make a big batch. And remember, you will, if you're gonna strain it to make Greek yogurt like I am at the end, you're not going to end up with this much yogurt, okay? Because we strain off the whey. So your yield is going to be less. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and just pour this in. Now, one thing you do wanna make sure, and I'm sure everybody will make sure of this, you want your pot to be very clean. So clean it with some hot soapy water. You can even put it through the dishwasher to sanitize it, but you do wanna make sure that it is clean. And you want to use fresh, unopened milk. I really don't recommend grabbing milk out of the refrigerator that's been in there 3 or 4 days and making yogurt, because let's just say that maybe boiling it did not kill all the bad bacteria. You really don't want to waste your time and then ferment the hours that it takes to make yogurt and end up with that bad bacteria multiplying. So really, I recommend just getting fresh milk from the store for this purpose. All right, so now if you had ultra pasteurized milk like Fairlife, you could go ahead and add in your culture and whisk it in right now. But I have to boil mine first. So to do that, we are going to lower the lid. This is the slider. You want it all the way over to the right. And then we are going to turn the Ninja Foodi on. And we have to select the yogurt function. And we do that by turning this dial until yogurt lights up, which is right there. And it says yogurt 8 hours. Okay, now the fermentation time is what this 8 hours is referring to, okay? And that happens after the boil phase, but we set it right now. The longer you ferment your yogurt, the more sour and tangy it's going to be. So anywhere from 6 to 12 hours is perfectly fine. I like mine at about 8, and that's the default. If you don't like it as tangy, go to 6, and test it, see if you like it, and then if not, go to 8. You can always program it to go longer. All right, so now what I want to show you real quick on this model is, let's say you did have ultra pasteurized milk in here and you've already whisked in your yogurt starter. How do you bypass this? We want to go right to ferment, okay? So you see how YGT for yogurt is blinking? If we hit start, it's going to start to heat up and boil our milk. But again, let's say we want to bypass that because we're using the ultra pasteurized. You can do that by using these arrows right here. Hit it up and it starts to blink FER, okay? That means it's going to go directly into the ferment stage. But we don't want to do that today, so I'm going to take it back down to yogurt and hit the start button. And that is all we need to do for now. You don't even need to worry about whether you're vented or sealed here. Unless you're pressure cooking, the placement does not matter because there are vents in the lid. So the only time you need to worry about this knob is when you're pressure cooking. Make sure it sits in this valley, which is sealed, okay? All right, so we're gonna let this go. It's going to boil, bring the milk up to that 182-degree temperature, maybe even a little bit hotter. You don't need to stir, you don't need to do anything. I will go over what to do if there's a little bit of a film, a layer on the very bottom of the pot, but we'll deal with that after we make our yogurt. Okay, the next thing that I like to do is take the yogurt that I'm gonna use as my starter culture, because you do have to have a yogurt starter to make yogurt. So what I like to do is measure it out. I use 1/4 cup and I leave it out to come to room temperature for at least 2 hours. Now this may take 4 hours, so I might pop this back into the refrigerator and then bring it back out in a couple of hours so that it's room temperature when I add it in. I just think that that helps. It's not absolutely critical, but I believe that it helps get the incubation started right away. Now, what other things can you use for your yogurt culture? You can use, of course, your yogurt that you make, and that's what I recommend. But the very first time, you usually either have to buy a culture online, which can be in powder form, or just go buy a little container of plain yogurt. Doesn't matter if it's Greek yogurt or plain, regular yogurt, as long as it's not flavored, it'll be perfectly fine. And it has to have active cultures, which almost all of them do. So don't worry too much about it. Like if you just get some Dannon yogurt that's just plain, not vanilla flavored, not strawberry, none of that, but just plain, you'll be fine. Usually if it doesn't have the active cultures, that's gonna say it on the packaging. So don't worry too much about that. They almost all do. All right, so if you make a batch of yogurt and you want to freeze a starter, you can also do that. So you can take a 1/4 cup of your yogurt out, put it into an ice cube tray or just into a little baggie. You could throw it in the freezer, but you need to bring it back to room temperature before using it to make your next batch of yogurt. And I've noticed that freezing it works perfectly fine when it's a freshly made batch of yogurt, but you don't want your yogurt to be sitting in the refrigerator for 7 days and then you grab your starter out, your 1/4 cup, and put it into the freezer. You want it to be right after you make it so that bacteria is really, really lively, okay? Then we freeze it, room temperature, use it as your starter. Use it up within 3 months in your freezer, okay, for the best results. Or you can go to the store and just buy a tub of yogurt each and every time and use a 1/4 cup of it. And I use a 1/4 cup whether I do a 1/2 of a gallon or a whole gallon. I haven't noticed any difference, so I don't want you to worry too much about that. If you have like a little bit shy of a gallon, you can still use the 1/4 cup. It's perfectly fine. All right, so let's let this do its thing, and then after it's boiled and cooling down, I will get the culture stirred in and we will start to ferment. All right, so it took a total of 5 hours for the Ninja Foodi to heat the milk up to that 182, 190 range. I did not take a temperature, but it almost brings it to boiling and then cooled down. Now that is with the lid closed, okay? Because I wanted to see exactly how long it was gonna take if you wanted to kind of set it and forget it, okay? So 5 hours for the boiling and cooling. That is a really long time. You can get that done in a matter of an hour, maybe an hour and a few minutes if you use sear saute to bring it up to the temperature and then cool it in that ice bath like we talked about earlier in the video. So you can really save a lot of time. However, the 5 hours plus the 8 hours for the incubation might work out perfectly for you. So it's totally up to you. But this way you can judge and you can decide when to start your yogurt based on how long it's gonna take, okay? Because you don't want the yogurt to be done, 4 o'clock in the morning, let's say. Unless you get up at 4, then it's all right. But if you don't want it to be done because you do want to get it into the refrigerator right after it's done incubating. All right, so what happens is it beeps and it says add and stir. What that means is add your culture and stir it in, okay? So let me go ahead and lift this up. I always like to use my instant read thermometer to take a temperature just to make sure, although it has always been below 110. And it looks like it's 107, 108. So yep, so we're good to go, all right? So that's no problem. It needs to be below about 115 degrees in order to be safe to add the starter. Then what you might notice is that there's a little bit of like a skin, so to speak, on the top of the yogurt. Well, it's not yogurt, it's just warm milk right now, but you know what I mean. So what we wanna do is grab it out because we don't wanna stir that in. So I just go through, just a little one there. All right, there we go. Now we can whisk in our yogurt. So here is a 1/4 cup of room temperature yogurt. All right. And then I just use my little silicone whisk and just sort of whisk. Now, one thing that I don't do is I don't go all the way to the bottom when I'm whisking. I just kind of keep it just above the bottom and just move this around. The reason being that on occasion, when I've used the Ninja Foodi to heat the milk and I'm not there stirring it, on occasion, there's been like a layer, not scorched, so you don't have to worry about that. It doesn't like flavor the yogurt batter or anything like that, but just a little film on the very bottom. And I don't want to bring that into the yogurt. So I'm just gonna not go all the way down to the bottom with my whisk. All right, that's it. Now we can close the lid here. And it has gone to the 8 hours. That means incubation. I didn't touch the display. It automatically will switch from add and stir over to 8 hours if you take a little bit longer to stir in your culture, which we did because we were getting things set up. All right, and then just hit the start button. Now you'll see ferment, and it will start the 8-hour ferment. Now remember, I said this earlier, I'm gonna say it again, the longer you ferment, the tangier the yogurt, okay? So if you wanted, a higher time because you wanted it to be tangier, you can always go up, okay? I think you can do 12 hours. Then some people really like to ferment their yogurt for 24 hours. You can do that as well. When the 12 hours is up, or let's say it gets down to an hour, just reset the time again. That would be for another 12 hours. So you'd go a total of 23 hours. Or let's say you're not around and it flips off. Remember, you can bypass the boil stage, like I showed early in the video. So if you get down, 12 hours is up, you want to go another 12 hours, it's perfectly fine. Bypass the boil, go straight to ferment, set your time for 12 hours again, and you can do a 24-hour ferment on your yogurt. But I don't like mine that tangy, so I take it down to 8 hours, and that's what we want to do. So in 8 hours, this will be done. It will be thickened up. You'll see a little bit of whey rising to the top. Then we get it into the refrigerator to chill, and then into the strainer to make Greek yogurt. All right, so the 8-hour ferment is done, and now we can open up the lid and check on our yogurt. And it looks exactly like I would think it would look here. So it should be pretty set, a little jiggly, and I can see some lighter parts on top. That's the whey that's sort of separating out. So let me just show you this right now here. So it is definitely yogurt, and that white, clear, yellowish really, liquid is the whey. Now, if you can see this right here, see how the yogurt's kind of coming out of those holes? And that's because it is still warm and not quite set up. So what I like to do, because I'm going to strain it to make Greek style yogurt, which is a thicker yogurt, and that's what I like to eat, I'm gonna put this in the refrigerator, okay, for about 4 to 6 hours. So if you do your timing correctly, you can make the yogurt during the day and then put it in the refrigerator overnight, and then you can strain it. Now, I recommend chilling it before you strain it. It's not absolutely mandatory to do it that way, but I think you get a better yield out of it if you're gonna make Greek yogurt. If you're just gonna serve it like this, just put it in the refrigerator to chill. When it's cold, you can just serve it right away. So I refrigerated the yogurt for about 4 hours, and now I'm going to strain it. Now, straining is completely optional, like I've said before in the video, because you can serve it right now. It's just going to be a loose yogurt, just like you would buy at the store. But if you're a fan of Greek yogurt, then this is the way to make it. So just use a ladle, and I like to use a ladle instead of pouring it out because I just feel like I get better results that way. I get more yield. Because sometimes when you first put the yogurt in, you might see a little bit dripping that is the actual yogurt, and we don't want that. We really just want the whey to separate out. Now you can do this with doubled up cheesecloth, or a lot of times I'll use what are called flour sacks that I get from either Sam's Club or on Amazon. But then I saw this and I thought, I'm gonna give it a try. I've been using it for a couple months now and I really like it. So it's just a strainer that will then sit in the refrigerator and strain your yogurt for you. I will warn you though, it is sort of a pain to clean, but I find it easier than I used to tie rags up on my cabinets to be able to strain it out. And this I can just sit in the refrigerator. The reason I don't pour it out or scrape the bottom, I'm not even scraping the bottom, is because of that layer that you may find on the very, very bottom. And I don't want to disturb it, just in case there's any areas that it did get scorched during the boil process. I don't want to introduce that flavor to the rest of the yogurt. So I'm pretty careful when I scoop the yogurt out not to scrape the bottom. Now I'm almost down to the bottom here of the yogurt, and then I'll just go ahead and pour the rest out. And again, not scraping. So I'll leave a little bit of yogurt behind, but not too much. So you can see there's still a little bit left, and I don't want to scrape it. It doesn't look scorched or anything like that, but it is a thicker layer, and it is a little bit like on the, I want to call it curdled. That's not really the correct term for it, but it is kind of thick and a little grainy. So I don't like to introduce that into the yogurt that I'm going to eat because I like to have a very smooth yogurt. All right, now let me lift this up for you, and you can see we should already have whey dripping out, and we do. But let me lift it up. And hopefully you can see the clear liquid that's just dripping out. That is the whey. Now, once it's completely separated, you don't need to throw the whey away. You can use it as like the water in bread. So you can use it to make bread and add some extra protein. You can add it into smoothies. I mean, there's many uses for it. It freezes fine, so you can pop it in the freezer until you're ready to use it. All right, so now this goes into the refrigerator and strain until it's the consistency you like. You may just like it a little bit thicker, so that might take an hour or two. Or if you like it really thick like I do, it might take 4, 5, 6 hours, or you might even just leave it overnight. So it's been about 4 hours, and it looks like a lot of the whey has dripped out, so I'm gonna check on it and see if it's thick enough. You can always put it back in longer, so it's no problem whatsoever. Well, let's do the spoon test. A lot of people like to do that to see it. Will the spoon sink? Well, it does a little bit, yep. So really, well, down here on the edges, it's a little bit drier, but this is not thick enough for me. I'm going to keep it in the refrigerator probably for another 6 hours and let it continue to strain. But I'm gonna go ahead and test it right now for you guys. So yeah, it definitely can strain longer. The consistency is just not quite as thick as I like. But this might be perfect for you. You know, it might be absolutely perfect. It is like Greek yogurt, but still not quite thick enough for me. Now, I don't put any sweeteners in my yogurt when I make it because it can impede the process. You can mix in some things at this point, like if you like to have some fresh fruit in there or any kind of sugar, things like that. But usually what I do is serve it and I just add a little bit of honey and a few nuts of some sort, or dried cranberries or dried blueberries. They're really good in there as well. All right, let's give it a taste. Oh my God. Wow. That is really, really good. Just a tiny bit of tang. In fact, usually when I make it with an 8-hour incubation, it's a little bit tangier than it is right now. This is really nice and mild. Now again, it's not thick enough for me, but you can control that. So you can put it back in the refrigerator, let it strain longer. What I do recommend doing is moving it around. So move the yogurt around and kind of scrape at the bottom, because what happens is that it strains from the bottom and then it gets thick, and then the top can't really release its way through that thick layer down underneath. So give it a little stir, and let's see if we can start that process again. It looks like we have, I would say right now, about 6 cups of yogurt, about. All right, let's see, am I getting any more whey draining? Yep, a little bit more is coming out. So I'm just gonna pop this back in the refrigerator, and then when it's thick enough for me, I will put it into individual containers, put it in the refrigerator, and it will last at least 4 to 5 days. Sometimes I even have it a little bit longer than that. But remember, take out your 1/4 cup, put that in the freezer right now to use as your next yogurt starter. Making homemade yogurt does take a little bit of time, but the flavor is unbeatable. I absolutely love it. Remember, you control how tangy it is. If you like tangier yogurt, incubate longer. You can control how thick it is. You can control what you put in it, so you can control what sweeteners you use or don't use. You can also use lower fat milk. I always use whole milk when I'm making yogurt, but you can use, 2% or even skim. It just won't be as thick, but it'll still be delicious.